Good morning. Mr. Wheeler, good morning, man. Where have you been this whole time? Yeah, Pan W's interesting. The only problem with Pan W, honestly, is how slow it is. But obviously, this thing has, an all-time high breakout, a big base that this thing has built, um, and a couple other stocks within that sector that I also think are acting fairly well. CrowdStrike is one of them, and Zscaler is the other. So you get a few names within the sector that are also acting well. The real problem when I look at a Zscaler is it just is one of those that just grinds, right? It doesn't really give you like explosive price action from a tight area. It just grinds, right? And so you kind of just have to pick your ascending moving average and then just let it work on that. And uh, and that's kind of how you treat it, right? It just moves sub 3% per day, and Lemonade. Lemonade's kind of interesting. It's doing a really nice job finding support on the rising 50. It's building some really subtle higher lows here. I don't know that I love it, but it does look pretty decent. This has basically built a whole new base. Effectively. It's all right. Don't know how much I love it. I don't really hate it. Yeah, SOUN was on last night's watch list video. I just don't know. I just don't know. Right? This one definitely feels like this setup here where it makes a big move, consolidates for multiple months, and then starts to come up the right hand side looks a lot like the first time. Right? Makes a big move, consolidates for multiple months, and then starts to come up the right hand side. And then eventually, it just goes explosive. Kind of feels fairly similar. Yeah, MP is behaving better. Unfortunately, MP shook me out. So I owned it on the 9th. I've talked about this extensively. Cut a piece the under prior day low, but I just cut the half that I had so long as we were above the 50. Trimmed some into this move here. Cut the rest on this bearish engulfing. Tried to get myself re-involved a few days ago, right down here. But unfortunately, I was stopped at low of day. I bought it like literally right in here, and then stopped at low of day, only to then see this thing, literally me sell it at the bottom, and then this thing turn right back around. And, holding this too would have been very annoying. So they have not made it easy. NXT, yeah, NXT is another one in that cyberspace that's acting pretty decent. Yeah, this thing can take out Friday's highs. Looks good. Yeah. This was actually exactly something I talked about last night. I put out the watch list video, and there we are kind of at that stage where maybe packing on a ton of new exposure here isn't the best idea. Now that could end up being the wrong thing. It could just be that a bunch of stocks continue to work, but there isn't a ton of merchandise. I think that's the problem for me right now is, I'm looking for setups like call it KTOS, right? Where you make a move up and then you consolidate for a little while and you tighten up and you create a beautiful little bull flag, right? This is the kind of setup that you're looking for when you've tightened up and then the market has been so friendly. This is the kind of move you get. right? And we don't really have what we have out here is a bunch of this. So unless money's going to rotate into new themes and sectors, then we could just be completely fine, and we might be able to find these bull flags. I'm not necessarily finding a bunch of them. Or the other thing that I'm looking for is, again, Rocket Lab being in the exact same sector as KTOS is just a new base, right? And I'm not finding many of these really growth names with these bases. They're already vertical. Um, so it's kind of tough at this moment for me to want to get too aggressive. Now there are setups, right? AMSC looks pretty interesting. A lab can go another 2-3 days of sideways and might be pretty good for an entry somewhere. I don't know exactly how I'd get myself in, but maybe a higher low setup. CRDO, could be pretty interesting. We'll see if this turns out to be a bear flag, or we'll see if this thing, can tighten up and build a higher low and then wants to continue higher. Palantir back over 190. This thing could be fairly interesting as a flat base breakout. So, yes, I kind of agree with what you said there. I feel like there are days to not do a whole lot. Yeah, RMBS is another semiconductor, and that's the thing. There are a lot of semiconductors that are acting fairly well. I have an alert set there. We'll see if over 105 this thing can get rolling. Yeah, Airbnb doesn't look all that hot. And the market's not unshortable. It's just, the market's so strong that, it's making shorting very difficult. But there are names like, for instance, Sprouts. This was a short when it broke the 200 months ago, right? For 2 straight months, this thing's been going down. Just a classic stage 3 top, just like ANF, right? You consolidate after a big stage 2 run up, stage 3 top, crack the 200, and then, you're just rolling over. I don't know that Rocket Lab is a laggard. It could very well be that Rocket Lab is a laggard. I would have loved this thing to have seen it, acting a little bit better earlier. But, it was just finishing building out a big base and shaking out a bunch of people, right? A nasty shakeout once, twice, 3 times. And then, it's just going at its own pace. The thing with the Rocket Lab is, like, for me at least, to like keep myself in this kind of a trade, is I got to remind myself that it is basically SpaceX Junior, and SpaceX has a $400 billion market cap, and this has a $25 billion, $28 billion market cap. So I think that with the amount of companies who are launching satellites into space, I wouldn't be too surprised if this is a 50 to $100 billion market cap down the road, and just to be a quarter of the size of SpaceX, because there's probably that much demand for sending satellites up into space. Hence the reason they got a renewed contract for more launches. So just kind of feels like this is, compared to the private market, highly undervalued, and I don't think SpaceX is overvalued. So from a fundamental perspective, which I normally don't care about, I care about technicals first. Feels like this thing can go much higher. Yeah, I actually haven't short them. And the reason I haven't short them in a little while was once I saw FLYE and I saw this action, I told myself it wasn't worth the risk anymore. Right? I caught a couple. That was good and all. But then you get this kind of action where they squeeze you out, they absolutely murder you. If I had even 20-30,000 shares here, you lose $1 million, right? It's just not worth it's not worth the reward. So I caught a couple, I got lucky. OST, PTHL, PCLA, but it's not worth the headache. Feels like a lockout rally? Yeah, it kind of is. And that's why you want to make sure you let your winners work, right? I want to let my stocks work as long as absolutely possible. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about UTI. A little too slow. Like it moves 3% per day and trades sub $25 million a day. I mean, it's totally like a random name. I personally I shorted GoPro on the Euphoria a few months. I wouldn't be trading this thing. I mean, it looks okay, but they're probably a bankrupt company in another year. I don't like to trade names that I think are going to be bankrupt soon. But in this market, the shittier the better. The shittier the better. What do I think of the metals company? There's no setup here, right? This isn't tight anywhere. So it's fine, but there's nothing tight about it. You see it right here. Now we were getting nice and tight. You make a move up, and then you start to go sideways, and then you start to push out. Yeah, there's nothing. There's nothing here currently. Bullish. Yeah, I don't mind the new name. Not bad. Still hanging around. We'll see what happens. Over 70 maybe. Yeah, I. This looks like a high type flag. A little bit longer. And I've talked about this now for the last few days. Every time I get asked about it, I didn't like it a few days ago because I thought it was too extended from the. Thought it was too extended from the 50. Let me see how extended it still is. Yeah, 5.48 times its ATR from the 50. So less extended now. Less extended. And Uber has been acting really well. Thoughts on WBD? Yeah, better, but this one's also a bit extended. I have any tips for managing high ATR stocks? For example, I'm used to trading 3 to 5 ATR, but entered open yesterday. Already pushed 9% from my entry point. So no, you just look at its ATR, make sure that you're sized properly, and then same thing. Look for a push for 3 to 5 days, trim a piece off into that strength, and then sit with the rest on an ascending moving average. And the only difference between a slower name and a faster name is your position sizing. How or at what point are you distinguishing a laggard versus sympathy play? They're basically the same thing. But just remember that like a stock in a really strong group can just go at its own time and doesn't necessarily have to be a laggard. Could it be a little bit of a laggard? Yes, but like if it's already been in an uptrend, like a sympathy play will get picked up after the leaders have made really big moves already, and then out of nowhere, on no news, no nothing, no catalyst, it'll just make a big explosive catch-up move, and then it'll die quickly. Um, but a laggard sometimes could be something like a Rocket Lab when you compare it to like a KTOS, or a AVAV or ASTS. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily it's not a sympathy play because it's already been in a steady uptrend for a year. In fact, it's up 1,000%. So, right there's nothing really sympathy play about it. It's been in an established uptrend for a long time. And stocks that are in established uptrends can just continue to stay in uptrends. One thing you have difficult with is sizing. If I have your entry at the break of a flat top and the price gap from below that day, putting stop at the beginning. Yeah, well, you just use a 5-minute opening range break if you have to, and you still really feel like you got to own it, and you size it down if you have to, right? And then if a stock is truly going to go higher, you'll get a secondary entry on it. Yeah, SMR has become a little bit of a laggard itself, right? When you compare this price action to Oklo, or now even recently NNE, where NNE's out to a new high, SMR is not really moving. Yeah, I'm going to avoid that one for a short, but yeah, at some point it'll hit the backside and then it'll be done. Where do I place DNN in its group? Laggard versus sympathy? It's just a laggard. It's not a sympathy. It's been in an uptrend with the uranium names for a long time, right? This looks just like CCJ. It just moves, a little bit after the fact. But, I mean, it's effectively the same chart. Yeah, 190 for Palantir maybe is actionable. You got shaken out of AMD midday. I mean, I talked about this yesterday. If you owned it from way lower, right, or even lower, or wherever the hell you might have owned it, I don't really know. Yesterday was just a good opportunity to trim into strength and then just keep the rest using like the ascending 5-day for now. No, I don't ever trade SPY. It moves too slow, and there's no reason for me to trade it. There's no edge trading ETFs at all. With crypto rallying recently, if it went sideways for a few weeks and started breaking out, would you consider them laggards if the individual stocks kept going higher in the meantime? No, I wouldn't think about it like that, honestly. Also, you're really not going to get MSTR or coin going higher without them, and all the other stocks like CleanSpark and Hut and Iron, those aren't even moving as crypto names anymore. They're moving as data center plays because they've got access to tons of power. BTCS, yeah, and then BTDR. Now these are laggards, but yeah, they're starting to work. PSKY. Nah, kind of random here. Super random price action. I mean, maybe it's nice and tight, but yeah, I'm literally on live almost all day as long as I'm at my desk. How do I screen for potential stocks? I've made some videos about this. I'd suggest kind of digging through my YouTube. I'll make a few more over the coming weeks or months or whenever I get a chance. But I've got videos on them, so look for them on the YouTube. Yeah, I saw that. TMQ, the U.S. is taking a 10% stake or something like that. It looks like it finally wants to get going over this base. Buying pullbacks to ascending moving averages or undercut and then rally back through on 10-1 seemed like the spot, but I don't know that I would buy this as a breakout, although it does look, ready to start making its way towards 100. Yeah, Jumia has been pretty interesting lately. SoFi was a nice setup as it bounced off the 50 simple moving average yesterday. Nice one. Yeah, I bought CoreWeave yesterday and I took a loss in it. So I bought it literally right here and I was like, oh, whoa, quick push, like $3 move. And then I was like, this is sweet. Wish they all push that quickly, and then that's how it goes. I don't know. No, because CoreWeave, I would need it to be breaking a prior day channel. That's not going to be possible. So, at best case scenario, this thing is inside yesterday's range. Yeah, I'm seemingly in a drawdown. It seems like all the time, but that's not like I'm not in a drawdown this year. But when you take a lot of because the way it works is you're constantly taking little paper cuts to latch yourself onto that one name. So my win rate is 35%, but I'm very bright green this year. Right? It's like 35 or 40%, which I personally love. Right? Imagine needing to be right 70% of the time to make money, 80% of the time to make like that sounds miserable. Right? I literally don't even have to be right more than a coin flip to make money. So, and that's because you keep your losses very small and then you let your winners run, right? I think like my win to loss, my R, as some people call it, is like 7-1. So I make $7 for every dollar I lose. I think I could check. So I'm at 38%. And I make $4.50 for every dollar I lose. Not many, and honestly, that's kind of my own fault. I should have done a better job not getting shaken out of stuff. So maybe widening out my stop, sizing things down just a little bit. So just a lot that I can study from over this last period with how hot it's been and things that I could have done a little bit differently. I mean, about every single stock that's made a big move, I've had on my radar right around the right time. But sometimes if you're like a day or two early and then they'll just, kind of go without you, they make it a little bit tough, but probably only for like a week or two was I more than 70% invested. And then again, it's still been a really awesomely profitable, last 6 months. How do I value companies like SpaceX? They all have a value. It's what they trade at in the public market. SpaceX is worth 400 billion. What do I think of QUBT? I'm not going to be playing these quantum names on the long side right now. What moving averages am I using? The primary one that I focus on is the 50 simple moving average, and that is like the start of a potential trend. The 200 obviously is for me one of the most important as well. Price has to be above for me to even consider it. And then for usually trailing the 10 and the 20. I have the 100 and the 150. It's just for a visual. It's not necessarily so I can trade around them, but just so I don't have a big gap between the 50 and the 100. Thoughts on BMNR? I almost talked about this last night in the watches video. It looks pretty interesting, right? I would prefer to play ETHU, but man, this thing looks coiled. If we get through this resistance gap, then who knows, man? Who knows? But yeah, I have mentioned it on like every stream that I would prefer to own ETHU over BMNR, but this thing does look pretty coiled. I got to give it a little bit of credit for looking so dang good, but I still don't know that I'd want to own it. And it's just because you can get diluted and then they're buying Ethereum, in which case wouldn't you want to also be buying Ethereum and not own the thing that's being sold? So like these treasury companies are being sold so they can raise capital to buy the underlying asset. So that's my thought. Yeah. ENVX. Fine. Looked better on 10-1. A lot of stocks look pretty good on 10-1, man. I wouldn't be a buyer of this here. So, right? This is what you want to catch. You see this 30% move out of this tight little consolidation, right? That's what you want to catch. This is like, it's what dreams are made of. 30% in 4 days. Like, where the hell else are you going to get that kind of money? So until it tightens back up, then there's nothing to do with it. No, I don't really have any interest in adding to my PDD. And the reason is it's just too damn slow and it's just grinding up the 20. So I'm just going to let it work for now. Yeah, CRS. This kind of looks like a little low cheat setup. Yeah, we'll see. I don't even know what you're asking. You're a new trader. If I'm investing, do I use spot market or leverage? I have no idea what you're even talking about. I have a margin account. I don't know if that's what you mean by leverage. And I trade common shares, not options. So if by spot market you just mean common shares and leverage meaning not options, then I only trade common shares. Good evening from India. What's up, man? Thanks for being here. Tesla. Well, one, I still own my Tesla and I added shares on this 424 pullback. So I added some shares right in here. I think it looks fine. The more sideways, the better. Let this finish building out, let the 50 catch up a little bit, and then let's see if it builds another higher low, and then we can add to it again on another higher low. I almost was looking at this last night. I was like, should I get aggressive and add to it over 453? I was like, no, I don't think so. Thoughts on NVIDIA breakout or IREN breakout due to NVIDIA cloud partnership? I mean, great. Stocks will move on whatever news they want. It's just far too extended here for it to be a buy. Right? This thing's at $62 now. Right? It's just far too extended from the 50 for me to be buying this. I want to catch a move like this, not buy a move like this at the very tail end potentially. Right? You got to wait for things to tighten up. Go back and check my Twitter. I was talking about IREN down here. Okay? In June, when it was nice and tight and just got above its 200. You don't hear me talking about it as a long up here. Not until it builds a new base. GitLab is such a laggard, I would leave it alone. Tesla's still my largest position. I still have ARK ETF from over 3 months ago, 4 months now, literally 4 months. I have Rocket Lab. I've got PDD. Wish I had a few more, but I don't. I've been shaken out of a bunch of names. I had Microsoft as well, but I got shaken out of that a couple days ago. Probably could have widened my stop, but no. Although this does look a little bit like SOUN, but this isn't really something. Also, it's not coming out of a tight area. Like if you really wanted it, 10-2. Yeah, I think you're stuck in 2022. ARK is an ETF, and how come I'm trying Kathy Wood's ETF, not understanding why hers when she has bad returns? So I think your mentality is stuck in 2022 instead of living in the current moment. I bought it down here. This doesn't look like a bad return to you, does it? It's 50%. 50% in 4 months is not bad, my friend. I don't know, you aren't understanding her underlying holdings, and you don't realize that all of her top 10 stocks are absolute monsters, from Hood to Roblox to Tesla to, Roku. They've all been acting well. CRISPR, TEM. So I think your comment just kind of shows me that you're stuck a little bit in 2022. You're not giving her the benefit of the doubt. And more importantly, you're arguing with price a little bit. Price is going up, and I bought it 4 months ago, and it's been nothing but rewarding. MSTR, I'm still not that impressed with the price action. It's been lagging price action. Now, if we can establish ourselves above the 200 for a few more weeks and Bitcoin is still pushing, then I would look at this in a different light, but I still wouldn't want to buy it. I'd rather buy something like BitX. Yeah, AOI, the entry was yesterday. I mean, I talked about this in the watch list video going into yesterday on the weekend. Um, as basically a break over 29 bucks. So now, did I think this was going to happen? No, not quite. Jumi has been strong, man. I don't know that I see a setup here. Nicer down here on earnings, but who knows? Maybe another week. Yeah, SoFi was nice as it bounced off the 50. Path I would have avoided. This thing has pretty much been crummy price action for forever. Let this thing really push out and then go sideways and wait for this 200-day to be sloping and going up. Yeah, you can I mean, it depends. Not just you can do this, buy and hold near the daily 20, but one, make sure that it's actually turning back up, and two, make sure that the stock is in a good group. No, I very, very rarely execute any orders pre and post market. Banks seem less extended. Yeah, I talked about these last night, and I would hope to see, a JP Morgan start to turn back up, a Goldman Sachs start to turn back up. They're not very extended from the 50, and it would kind of help, talk about rotation in the market a little bit versus just the same stocks needing to go up. But really, the market's super powerful. I mean, guys, we're at an all-time high right now. I mean, literally, as I'm talking, the stock market is making a new all-time high. So there is no complaints. No, I don't use anchored VWAP. My thoughts on IRIN or NBIS, they need brand new bases. Guys, you should be able to measure extension from the 50 simple moving average and realize quickly that something is far too extended for a new entry. My thoughts will always be the same when they're this extended from the 50. It needs a new base. It needs a new base. I mean, I think they're both fine. I don't necessarily look at the weekly per se when I'm trading. What do I think about short oil futures? No, I don't trade futures markets, and I don't really see a reason to short crude oil when it's the least owned it's ever been in like the last 15 years. So, no, I'm good. I'm overthinking BMNR. It's a chart, dude. All right. So why don't you go and tell me how much MSTR is up since November? Okay. It's actually red, obviously. And then in the same time, why don't you tell me how much Bitcoin is up since November? Since it's just a chart, dude. And then when you realize it's not just a chart, dude, you can get back to me, dude. It's not just a chart, man. They're diluting the shit out of you, hence the reason it's been underperforming. If you want to let your money underperform, then that's cool. Does it decide to one day go back to 500? That sounds fantastic. I don't need to own it. You can own BitX and get leveraged Bitcoin, and it moves probably faster than MSTR. It moves about the same. 33% in the last 8 trading days. And in those same trading days, 23%. There you go. And you want to own MSTR or BMNR. There's no reason. You can own ETHU. Maybe BMNR has actually outperformed a little bit, but not enough to make it worth owning. Yeah, when the market came down from February to April, I was short 7 stocks. I'm comfortable shorting. I treat setups very, very similar on the short side as I do the long side. So how do I sell into strength? If I get like a nice push 3 days, so Rocket Lab, let's take for example. Yesterday was day 3 for me, so I trimmed some off, and then now I can just let it work on this ascending 20. That's it. Trade's done. And then the more extended we get from the 50, once we get 7 times its ATR, so considering the stock moves about 7% per day, if we were to get, let's say, 49, 50% away from its 50 simple moving average, like if this thing were to go to $70, I would trim some more. And then every ATR over 7 times its ATR from the 50, I would trim some more and trim some more. Right? And keep trimming 20% of what I have left every ATR over 7. But if it doesn't really get extended and it were just to go up a couple day increments, go sideways for 2 days, continue higher, go sideways for a day or two, continue higher, and it never really gets extended from the 50, then I would just continue to own what I have. I don't, if a stock is 20 ATR, if a stock's 20-day ATR is 5, but in a day jumps 4 or 5 exits ATR. So you mean if in a day it moves 20%, I would be trimming. I would be trimming that position. If you catch a 20% move in a day on a stock that moves 4 or 5%, you trim. Is Datadog still buyable? No, it's not. At least not for me. Datadog was a buy on 926, and that's it. Maybe on 10-1, but TPL, isn't this an expensive stock? No. Is TPL a long? Why would TPL be a long with a declining 200? Have I ever risked a name like DVLT? I don't understand what you're asking, but you mean have I ever traded a name like DVLT? Why would I do that? Why would I buy this dog shit? Why would I do that? It's really, I would just look at like percent push from my average, right? If it just grinds slowly, then I don't really do anything with it. I'll wait till we get, a nice exaggerated push. But it's really just, if your stock is continuing to hold up well when a market undergoes even a smaller time frame correction, then you just hold on to it. I don't trade options or futures. I saw Rocket yesterday, RKT. I noticed it was coming down. Yeah, this is a kind of no touch. Look at the volume that came into this thing and all of it on the way down. And now you're breaking the 50-day. For me, it's a no touch. My thoughts on Elf Cosmetics. I'm not sure here. I don't think it looks bad. I just don't see this setup. Totally random and trades less than $10 million a day. No. You're in Rocket Lab. You sold a third yesterday. No, I wouldn't sell any more if you sold some already. I would just trail the ascending moving average. I mean, if you feel like you have to sell a third, sell a third. But for me, it's just, I'm already down to my trail position. It's just time to let it work. No. I mean, the news yesterday was that they're getting probed by, I don't know, was it the SEC or somebody? I would just leave them alone for now. I don't like to buy price that undergoes big volatility and loses like a month's worth of price action in a day. And, it would need to retighten back up. Yeah, BLSH is interesting. I looked at that one earlier. It's fine. Apple is looking better and better. It looks like a nice little high type flag. Yeah, not bad. You take its ATR and then you divide it by the distance from the 50 simple moving average. So if it moves 3% per day on an ATR basis, right, and then it's 12% from its 50, it would be 4 times its ATR from the 50. Meta's interesting. It just needs to reclaim the 50-day. Right? I don't see a reason for me to get involved down here. Let it reclaim the 50 and then, we can maybe get going. Cadence. Yeah, Cadence is interesting. The only problem with CDNS, slow. It moves 2% per day. Yeah, Estee Lauder with looking a lot like Elf. Yeah, this thing is basing too. And above the 200. Not bad. Not bad. I don't know if I love it, but yeah, this recording you could watch it on YouTube. It should be up later after I'm done recording. Do I wait for pre-market high low to break out? No, sometimes it's just a break of prior day high. The only way I really care about pre-market action is if there's a lot of volume on there or if there was a catalyst. What's my average holding for position, like holding time? 20 days right now. 20 days. And that also includes, my losses, which is 1 day. Average hold time for winning trades, 20 days. Average hold time for losing trade, 1 day. Can PayPal be promising with its base? It's below the 200. Let it establish itself above the 200. Yeah, usually low of the day when I get a breakout. Correct. Yeah. And then, Johnny, I will look at price structure. If it pulls back and then builds higher lows from there, so long as those are taking place above the previous low, then I just let it work. Oracle looks like a good buy. I thought it was a good buy about 281. I don't know. Yeah, it looks interesting. We'll see what happens if this thing can get back over the 20. No, I would like to have more positions on personally. Right? 4 is not enough unless they were bigger dollar positions and they're not really massive in any kind of way. So 10 positions is a little bit better, 8 positions, something like that. Thoughts on ANET? ANET's a little like the Shopify and Zscaler and whatever. It looks good, but it's just kind of slow. Like its thing's been doing not a whole lot since its previous earnings, right? And that's the problem. I'm starting to wonder if these things are also starting to lag a little bit. But I mean, it is still in an established uptrend. I don't mind it. It's also part of like that data center theme. No, I don't ever use a time stop. No, price only. Yeah, SOUN does look interesting over $19. Maybe. I liked SOUN right through this little pivot. I was like, oh, you know what? That doesn't look too bad. Plus, look at the volume that's been coming in here. Like on the way down, they're not really selling it. On the way up, there's pickup in volume every time. Yeah, again, Rocket Lab, that one had a low of day stop the day that, I was getting in. No, there's no, why would I trade at PayPal? Right? If I only have room for 10 stocks in my portfolio, call it, let's just say you had room for 15 stocks in your portfolio. Why would PayPal underneath the 200 simple moving average make the cut? I don't know. This air, super choppy. This doesn't really have a history of super clean linear moves, but looks like it's getting better. I've talked about lemonade a lot, guys. I think lemonade looks fine. I just don't love it. SEs is fine. International stocks have been working well lately. We talked about this yesterday in the room. I thought it was buyable yesterday, so we'll see. The weed stocks, it's MSOS or nothing. Yeah, Grab was good. Grab was another one that we talked about yesterday in the room. I think it looked pretty good yesterday. So just over that little tight days high. And, for me at least, the entry was right here. I mean, could have even waited for this volume bar to come in. AMSC looks good. No, I'm not considering trimming sooner because we don't know. Like, we call this a later stage bull market, but we don't really know, right? How do we know this market doesn't have another 2 years left in it? If I'm starting to notice positions falter, then I'll be a little bit more on alert. But I mean, for the most part, Nvidia still looks good. AMD just made a massive move. Microsoft still looks fine. Apple looks close to an all-time high breakout. Tesla looks like it could go see an all-time high soon. So like, this isn't so much of a later stage as we may think. Yeah, DK is interesting in the energy sector, but I don't know how I feel about energy. GNRC, Generac. Maybe. If there was going to be a short, it was going to be here. 923. Any other stocks of the nuclear theme like NNE? Oh, well, there's Oklo. Yeah, these I mean, Chinese names keep acting well. I haven't looked at KC in a little bit, but don't hate it, don't love it. Thoughts on Roku? I mean, the higher this goes, the better for Kathy. I don't love this setup. I don't really like channeling charts. I like more of a flat pivot. But it looks like it's just grinding higher. So I would just say you can focus on what seem to be the best themes, but you can't fall in love with stocks that have already made massive moves. You need them to base out. So then another way to, kind of take it one step further is, do they have good earnings and sales? No, you haven't missed the train at all, right? All this is done is bottom, get back above the 200. Now you wait for a consolidation, right? You haven't missed anything. If this thing's actually going to go higher, it'll do something like this, right? It'll get above the 200 and then it'll start to go sideways for a long while and then it'll break out, right? It'll just have a breakout. But you haven't really missed anything. Let it go sideways now that it's above the 200. Thoughts on PSKY? No, I already looked at this one. Just totally random. BTQ, another Eric Jackson stock, if I'm not mistaken. No. I mean, it's at $11 today. I'm not chasing these stocks with, no earnings, no sales, no revenue, no product, no nothing. Pumped by Eric Jackson on CNBC. No, I'm good. Let it establish real price action like Open Door. with real big volume, right? Like this is, okay, like yesterday, I thought Open Door was buyable. I thought Open Door was buyable here. And then I thought Open Door was buyable here, right? And this thing has been trading massive volume, almost $3 billion a day. No, if I've got money in my portfolio, I don't just randomly sell something. I let it work. I treat every stock for its own price action. If I need money because I'm fully invested, then I sell my slowest stocks. Yeah, you could day trade if you'd want. Is there any way to get involved with these extended stocks? Yeah, you could day trade, but that's not what I choose to do. Right? I don't want to have to come up with a bright idea every day of my life to make money. That sounds like a miserable existence. All right, guys, I got to get my butt rolling. You guys were awesome today. Thank you for all the million questions. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Keep it safe out there. Don't chase anything that's super extended. And you guys have an awesome trading day today. And I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Nope. Thank you, guys. Later.